What's up YouTube, Photoshoot here, and this month we got another deck profile. I had to wait for a couple of weeks because there was just one card missing, but it finally arrived, so now I can do this deck profile. This deck is of course Tengu plants, and it's probably one of the most iconic decks of this game, or at least the most iconic deck of this format. The first YCS in this format wasn't even Toronto, it was actually Ecuador, and it was just a couple of weeks after the ban list, so a lot of players wrote this deck off after the limitations of Pot of Avarice, Trishula, Formula Synchron, and cards like Debris Dragon and Lone Blossom. But even with less people playing the deck, it still was able to get a couple of top spots. This YCS was won by the Agent deck. In Toronto, a couple of American players saw a lot of potential in this deck, like George Orlando mentioned in this video, and a couple of other players like Sean Montague as well. Also, this Alistair Allens and two-time YCHS champion of this format, Billy Bragg, decided to play this deck at Toronto. And not only did Billy win with Tengu plants at YCS Toronto, but also with a more refined build at YCS Columbus, where the Darkwood structure was also introduced. So, as you can see, this deck was, even after all those limitations, pretty strong until Photon Shockwave came around. After that, Rabbit was, of course, the most played deck and probably the best deck of this format. So that's the main reason why the cards is before Photon Shockwave. You could argue that Darkwood is also excluded in this format. But the Darkwood deck didn't shape the format to a certain extent like the Dino Rabbit deck did, and also cards like Wind Up Zenmains, for example. So, without further ado, let's get to the deck profile. So, now let's get to the deck profile. First, we got 3 Reborn Tengu. This was one of the cards that gives this deck its name. This card is, I don't think this card needs any explaining in this deck. It enables synchro plays. It's great in its beatdown strategy, what this deck can also do. Because this is one of the strengths of this Tengu Plant deck, that you are so versatile in your plays, and not every game is like the other. You don't have certain plays you have to do in your first couple of turns with the Agent deck, for example, where you just number some your Earth or Tour Guide and try to get access to your Venus. So this card very versatile, also in other decks, like the TG Stun deck, for example. But this card was pretty amazing with any kind of plant plays. Then we got, of course, 3 Tour Guide from the Underworld and 1 Sangan, which you could search out, of course. I don't think this card needs any explaining as well. It enables your rank 3 plays. It's a Dark Monster, which is very useful, and yeah, going into a Levier or even a Leviathan is pretty good. One thing that is kind of interesting is at YCS Indianapolis, which was before this format, you still got your Sangan search by detaching an Exceed material. So not only had you access to multiple debris, multiple lone fires, and multiple Pot of Avarice, but you could also normal summon your Tour Guide, go into summon your Sangan, go into rank 3, which was Granosaurus at the time, because you only had the structure deck. Generation Force wasn't out already, so you just went into rank 3, could into Granosaurus, detach, and could get Sanguine Surge and get your effect Baler for the next turn. So the plant deck, we could say, was very degenerate at YCS Indianapolis, and it's of course won the event. Then next we got the plant engine, which was one Dawnfire Blossom, one Dandelion, one Spore, one Glow Up Bulb, and of course it's technically not a plant card, but I would also count this as a plant engine card, which is Debris Dragon. Debris and Lone Fire, of course, went to 1 with the list, so you only had access to those cards for the plant engine. But even with cards like 1 for 1, this was still very powerful and very underestimated by a lot of players at the start of this format, which changed very quickly. Also, Formula Synchron Hype Librarian are limited, so your exotic options were cut down a lot as well. But you still had a lot of great players with Reborn Tengu, for example, which I already mentioned. You still had foolish Debris Dragon combos, and having Tunas that could revive itself from the graveyard, still very strong for any synchro strategy. Then my hand traps are a bit different from Billy's, because this is not a Billy Bracknet deck, this is my own plant list. So we got first the 3 Maxis and the 1 Effect Veiler. I still think this is the correct ratio. I think drawing multiple Veilers is very awkward sometimes. And if you still think Maxi is pretty good against the meta overall, it's pretty good in the mirror match. It's great against agents as well, when you can interrupt Venus play. And it's also generally against some matchups. Even if you don't have an optimal matchup, it's like basically an Abstract Goblin. So I still think this is the best hand trap in this format. Next is also pretty obvious, the 1 Gorse. And then I run Tragodia. This is something I saw Jesse Cott playing, so I started testing with it as well. I first tried 2 Tragodias, but I had a couple of hands which were very awkward as well, because in this deck you empty your hand a lot quicker than in decks like Chaos or the Agent deck, for example, where you could play it, or even Lightsworn. So you don't want to draw multiple Tragodias. But this card is also very versatile, especially in a deck where you could go into a lot of synchros, like the Change of Heart effect is pretty strong, and also being able to copy any level in your graveyard in a deck where you run a lot of different levels is also very valuable. It's also a dark monster, so you got synergy with your BLS, for example, as well. So I think 1 Tragodia is pretty good. I think it was in Pack's deck as well. So I think 1 Ghost Tragodia is enough. And because I run Tragodia, with Tragodia, 1 more option to get monster in the field, I also play 1 Chaos, double Chaos I mean. This was something Billy played in this Columbus list as well. I saw some people cutting it because they excluded the Dark World deck out of this format, but I still think even without Dark World this card is pretty strong. Like when you have some enemy controller plays, it's an out against a lot of things like a Stardust Dragon, for example, a Blackwing Armor Master, or generally a bigger monster. So if you still think this card is great at 2 in this deck, it's very versatile. It's one of my favorite cards in this format. I would cut down to 2. Then double Thunder King Ryo. This is the best card of this format, at least in my ranking, which I did a couple of months before. I wouldn't play the third one because sometimes you get a bit more normal sums in your hand, so you don't want to draw a sense where you could like draw into Tengu, Lone Fire, Thunder King, Ryo, and I don't know, a fourth normal sum like a Tuna or something. So to prevent your hands from getting a bit too cloggy, I think running 2 is still fine, but it gives your deck a bit more option for a stun element, and it's also a light monster. And getting this back with Labria is also pretty powerful. So, and the last monster, which I mentioned a couple of times in this deck profile, is of course the Black Luster Soldier, which got limited with the September banned list. The last banned list was actually the very popular, where this card was legal, or the last format, was actually the GOAT format. So all the GOAT players know how much havoc this card in this format. And it's it continued where it left off in GOAT format and was still brutal, especially those kind of BLS top decks or plays with Honest or Armory Arm. So I think this is one of the more problematic cards in this format, but the thing is, you have those type of cards in every format. No format is perfect. So yeah, you obviously going to play it in the plant deck. Then I run double enemy controller. This card it's insane how versatile this card is, especially with your tokens. I don't run scapegoats in this deck, or at least in the main deck, but I still think it's still a card you should play in this deck. You have like Dandelions still, or your Tengu, which could like get a tuner to your side of the field, summon the next Tengu, and then go into any kind of synchro play. So great card. Then double space. I don't think you need 3 in the main deck. You could side like for more back row heavy matchups the third one, but you don't necessarily need to go off if you plays like for example the Agent deck, where I would run 3. Then we play a couple of one-offs because it's a good stuff deck. You run good cards: Heavy Storm, Dark Hole, the Book of Moon, Monster Reborn, Pot of Avarice, which was at 3 in the last format, but they decided to limit it. 1 Foolish Burial, 1 Mind Control, and then to summon out your Spore or your Bulb, or in some cases even your Vela as a light monster, 1 for 1. Then for the traps, I play a pretty standard lineup, which Billy Break did as well, which is the 3 Solemns, which is the best traps in the format, 1 Torrential, and 1 Trap Dust Shoot. So I'm going to explain some cards which you could play as well after I'm done with the extra deck, because the fun thing about this deck is you have a lot of choices you could make. So I don't think any plant deck is going to look like the other plant deck. You could still like run different trap in your lineup. For example, George Orlando did this in his plant deck, which he profiled on his channel. So I'm going to take a look at those choices you could make also. Then extra deck, this is pretty obvious, Trishula. Then you play Scrap Dragon Stardust as your level 8. Those are the best options as level 8 in my opinion. And you can also summon out with the Pre-Dragon, because it's a dragon. Because you need to summon dragons with this. Then the same goes for Black Rose. Then at level 7 you play Agent Fairy. Besides Black Rose, there are a lot of the generic level 7 options are very underwhelming. So Fairy Dragon is great against like a Gravekeeper type of deck because this deck could stun you a lot. So I think Ancient Fairy Dragon is still the correct choice. You can also sum it out with like Debris Dragon, Dandelion type of Debris and Dandelion, and then if you have a level 1 tuner like Bulbous Spore in your hand, special summon this and go into Trishula. So this isn't a fun option. Then for level 6, Bruan Bryanek, then 1 Orient Dragon, still a dragon you could summon out with Debris Dragon. But I still think this card is very underestimated, and not a lot of players play this card in other decks where you don't play Debris. This card isn't out to a lot of problematic cards like Stardust, like Scrap Dragon. So a lot of decks end on 1 Synchro Monster, and this card is also great to bait out a lot of stuff. So other plays like your Black Luster Soldier, or if you have to follow up your Trishula, for example, could go through. So I think this card should be played in a lot more decks, and I think it's probably the best level 6 Synchro option besides Gaia Knight, which is probably better in some skill drain kind of decks like the TG Stun deck, which we're going to take a look at in other month. But for now, we have the Tango Plant deck, so we of course play the 1 Hyper Librarian and 1 Catastor. So these are kind of obvious choices. And that's level 4 Armory Arm and the Formula Synchron. For the Exceeds, we of course run 1 Utopia, and for rank 3s, I play kind of an interesting choice: 2 Leviathan Dragon, which I'm going to explain, and 1 Levier. In this format, you have lots of times to go into a rank 3 play of Tour Guide just to bait out a Thunder Gengario. So a lot of times I'm in a spot where I would like to have a second Leviathan Dragon as speed stick, where Levier wouldn't do anything which I wanted to do. So the 15 extra deck spot is kind of debatable. As you can see, I don't play Steelstorm Roach, which was in the original list. I'm going to show you guys my reasoning after that. So you could exchange the second Leviathan for something different if you think you don't need the second Leviathan Dragon. I decided to play this because I had a lot of games where I have wanted the second one, so I got this card. The fun fact, this was actually a card which was missing last month. So yeah, otherwise I had to do the deck profile without it. So now there are a couple of extra deck choices you could also make, which are also very valid, which is the Steelstorm Roach, which is mainly for the agent matchup. I'm not the biggest fan of this card in this deck because, as you saw in the trap lineup, there's nothing that could protect it very effectively besides like the Book of Moon. Some lists run also cards like Dimensional Prison, at least Giorgio Lando did this, and I don't like cards that are like this card without any kind of battle trap, because it's just way too easy to get run over. So I decided not to play this in this deck. It's also valid to run this card for the agent matchup, or especially if your build is a little bit different with like Mirror Force or a Dimensional Prison. But this is the reason why I exclude this card out of the extra deck. If you want to have a third level 8 option, I think you could also run Fort Ruler, which is fine in some kind of matchups. This card is a bit better in the previous format, where you also have the Water Synchro format, where you also have Water Synchro. So this, or even Colossal Fighter if you want, could also be an option. Then Chimera Attack Fortress Dragon. If you side deck Saber Dragons and you got the space and you don't want to put this into the side deck, you could also run this as your 15th card. And then I have two options which are a bit more niche, which is Arcanite Magician and Ancient Sacred Wyvern. The thing is, you only make this two with Formula Synchron Hyper Librarian, or in Ancient Sacred Wyvern's case, you can also make this with Chaos and Effect Veiler. So if you want to have this option, you could especially call you opponent off guard with Arcanite Magician, because was maybe preparing for Black Rose, or if you have a game state where you don't necessarily want to go into the Black Rose, Arcanite Magician could be even a better option in this moment. For me, those cards are way too specific in a way. Of course, you could have this one game where you can OTK with this. If you want to have this as an option, you could play this, so I want to mention those two as well. Yeah, which I kind of missed is also then I want to talk about main deck options as well, which you could play in this deck, which are first, you could play the third Ryo. This is in my side deck when I go when I go first in game 2 or 3. So you are more likely to draw this, because opening this with is pretty strong in this format, especially against a deck which is very reliant to search out their combo pieces in the first couple of games, the agent deck, or even, for example, if you play with Dark Worlds, you could deny Snow Search. But you have to be very careful, because Grapha can deal with this card very easily. So keep that in mind. And also decks like Gadgets, for example, could also get stunned by this card. Then One Dimensional Prison. Jojo Land ran this card at 1 in his deck. It's also fine. It deals in game 1 with Archlord Christia, or even deals with Stardust Dragon. Also, or could remove something like a Thunder King Ryo as well. I didn't have the space for this card. I ran this for a couple of games. It wasn't terrible, but I replaced this card with Trap Dust Shoot, because I wanted to get, when I got max seed a lot in those test games, and I think Trap Dust Shoot is a good way to prevent my opponents from doing that. I talked a lot about Trap Dust Shoot in my last video, so if you want to know why I think about this card, then you could check this out as well. Then One Spirit Reaper, which I cite as well. I think this card is way better in the Dino Rabbit format, because Dino Rabbit has some trouble dealing with this card. I would probably main deck it in a format after Photon Shockwave. I think this card was fine, I guess, in most of the games. You could cite this against agents to stall a bit against the Christia. It's an okay card, I think, but it's not amazingly strong. So it was just a matter of having no space for this card. But I would still cite it in, like Dimensional Prison, like Thunder King Ryo. So most of the cards I'm going to show you are cards from my side deck. Then of course we got the Scapegoats. This card underperformed a bit when I played it, and a lot of times I had very awkward synchro plays with it, or the case that this card was didn't do that much a couple of turns. I sided in against the Ancient deck with 3 Leeching Delights. So this is a combo you could keep in mind. Because if you resolve this with Leeching Delight, you could very easily OTK your opponent as well. So this is kind of a neat strategy which you could approach. I didn't like this card that much in the main deck. It's fine, I guess, if you want to play it. But yeah, I decided to against running it. And the card which I think is a bit weaker, and I wouldn't side in this compared to Dimensional Prison, because it's not that it's fine against like the Agent deck, but not amazing, because it could get dealt with very easily thanks to Master Hyperion. It's not that great against the TG deck, and I think even against Synchro decks that can put out Stardust a lot. The only card I think where this card is better than Dimensional Prison is probably against Fortro the Archfiend. Yeah, but you could run it, especially if your opponent is not prepared for it. You could, because this is going to make your opponent reconsider about how he plays the game, or if he switches anything to attack, because they don't know if you side this card out or if you keep it in. So you have some kind of 9 games which you could approach. Yeah, I still decided to play this card. If I wanted to play a Battle Trap in the main deck, I would probably just go for the Dimensional Prison. So this was the deck profile of the Tengu Plant deck. It's amazing how this deck evolved over the last couple of years, especially after people like George Orlando Pack promoted this format as well. It doesn't, if you just don't know what the format is all about and just look at this deck, it doesn't look like that much, and the deck like Agent looks probably a bit more threatening. But it's amazing how most of your, like almost every hand you play is playable. You rarely break with this deck. This is something which makes this deck a bit more consistent than the Agent deck, where you could draw hands with multiple shine balls, or complete combo pieces like your Birdman, which is sometimes very underwhelming. So a lot of times when I play this deck, I still find a way to get out of certain situations which would have been probably game. But this deck doesn't need that much to get going, so I think this deck, it has the slight edge over the Agent deck, which is, in my opinion, the second tier 1 deck in Toronto format. If you include Dark Worlds, you could also include Dark Worlds in your tier 1, but I think the Dark World deck is very fragile. I'm actually going to make a video about excluding the Dark World structure in the format, because I have some things on my mind. So before we end this video, we got the tokens as well. So if you like the video, I make sure to like it if you want. Otherwise, if you have some opinions about the ratios I made, or anything else you want to tell me about this deck, then you could also comment. Until then, this was the Tengu Blend deck profile. See ya.